Start off by like introducing yourself, like your name and position.
Okay. My name's Diane Gorman. I'm a public school teacher at Henry Jackson, where the first community case of the coronavirus in a school was detected. And don't really have a position other than teacher. And I'm also immunocompromised. So I am put at that at-risk category that we keep hearing about of people that do need to worry more about this virus.
How long have you been teaching?
I have been teaching for 32 years in some way. I started in East LA, and I did take some time off when I had kids, but during that time I taught preschool, which is a lot like high school, so it's still teaching. And then now I've been teaching in Washington State for the past 15 years or so.
Oh, yeah, and just so you know, I do have a connection to Miss Gorman. I was one of her students. Some might say I was her favorite student of her whole 32 careers of teaching. But all right, so something that I also want to bring up is to kind of give some pre-context is, can you kind of like describe and go more into like your kind of condition with like your immune system that you have?
Yeah, so I have a rare disease called relapsing polychondritis. 3 in 1 million people get it. So it's very rare. They think it's autoimmune, but because the number of cases are so low, it is difficult to do any sort of studies on it. But like all people with autoimmune disease, the really only treatment they can do is to give you drugs that dampen your immune system, because your immune system is what is attacking your own body. So while I could make choices to go off all treatment, for example, to help me fight off something like the coronavirus, when our own bodies are attacking our own selves, like my eyes, my joints, my trachea, my heart, not only can it lead to severe illness or death, but it also puts our immune system still at a very weak point, because instead of fighting pathogens, they are literally attacking ourselves. So there's not an easy answer like just don't take your medication, etc. That all categories of autoimmune mean your own body chooses to attack some particular part of your body.
Yeah. Also, kind of starting from the beginning, can you bring up the situation that started at your high school, and just kind of bring up like how when it got brought up, you said you were already kind of sick once you found out about the whole thing, and then kind of dive into how you felt once you found that information out, and what your thoughts were, and like kind of what your plan of action was after hearing about all that.
Yeah, so I had been watching the coronavirus news, with grave concern, because I knew it wasn't when, but if it comes to the United States. And I was kind of feeling sick that week at work, just like cold symptoms, a very sore throat, headaches, etc. But you don't stay home with every cold, especially someone like me with an immune system problem. I often have a cold for 6 weeks, so I was telling myself to be calm. It's just a cold. And, I obviously tried to practice good hygiene all the time because of my condition. But Friday, I felt this sense of impending doom. So at a staff training, we had to stand by a picture that best conveyed how we felt. So I went to the nuclear bomb picture. But this was before we had any outbreak at all. So 1 week ago, it's amazing to think there was nothing happening here. But I just felt this sense of, life is going to change for me or others as of now. It was just a personal feeling that no one, really could agree with or whatever. So then that evening while I was, watching bad TV, I got a text saying that our first community case was discovered at Jackson High School, where I teach. And I was pretty sure I had very, very direct contact with the student, just from details that I could put together that I obviously could not, share. But I was thinking that they would contact teachers of this student just to let us know. So since I was sick, I decided I probably had to go to the doctors the next day. At this point, there were not all the warnings, like don't walk into a doctor's, office.
Yeah.
Don't, like, it was all just 1 week ago, very, very different. And my biggest fear at that time was, what if they quarantine me? Who would take care of Zeus? I'll go crazy little room with no one to visit me. And so there was just a lot of fears even about going to the doctor. But I thought that it was my responsibility since I was sick and I had a student with the virus, I should go to the doctor. So the next morning I went to the doctor. I told them where I worked and my symptoms. They gave me a mask. There are no masks to buy or to get at the elevators, et cetera, which we all know. They're all gone, So they gave me a mask at the desk and I sat far away. They called me back to a room. They took my temp and my blood pressure and said, you are now officially on quarantine, and shut the door. And I did not hear anything for almost 2 hours. Not a single.
How did that feel, being told you're in quarantine and just put in a room for like 2 hours to let them just let you like overthink of every single worst case scenario for 2 whole hours?
Well, I thought they were serious that I was going to be quarantined. And so my questions were like, but wait, you haven't even tested me. I might just have a cold. Aren't you going to examine me? Aren't you going to, find out? So I'd assumed I was going to be tested. I heard bits and pieces of conversations about me outside, and I heard them taping things to my door and putting tape and, all this stuff going on. And so at that point, my fear was just, oh gosh, what does quarantine mean and where will I go and all this? So then about 2 hours later, doctor comes in, no mask, shakes my hand and says, you're fine. And he hasn't even examined me yet. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, oh yeah, you don't have severe enough symptoms, and you probably have a cold. And I kind of just said, these are some of the things that's different than a cold, because I still haven't had any sinus at all, congestion, which is normally a cold thing, but a lot of the cough and chest pain and all that. And he said, well, then you have indigestion. And so it didn't fit that either. But anyway, he said, you're fine, go home, no need to worry. So I went home and it's not that I was just incredibly worried about myself, but I thought, this is not how I thought it was going to be handled. From everything I see on the news, when you have direct contact with a positive case and you're sick, you don't just go and say, yep, you're probably fine, go home. Because we've all seen what other countries are doing. So then I started contacting health officials. I had multiple emails with Snohomish Health District where their director assured me it was impossible for a teacher to be infected since it's not airborne. And so she doesn't quite get the way we teach. Maybe she thinks we're professors 30 feet from our students and writing on a chalkboard. But I'm in direct contact with 150 people within 6 feet for over an hour every single day. So, yes, we have direct contact. And she wrote me a few more times and then stopped writing to me. But this is the organization that is calling all the shots for my particular school district, because I live in Snohomish County. So I kind of lost hope in that particular avenue. And I tried to push at the start that teachers should be notified if this student was in my classroom. I was told a lot of different numbers, that at first 12 students were notified. Then it actually came out that only 4 students in my school of 2,500 kids were put on a watch list, and those were the only 4 students that could be tested. And so that seemed, again, like this is not what the news is saying. This is not how other countries are handling it. And probably had I not been treated like I was an idiot for asking questions, I would have dropped it. But I was really treated as if I were absurd to have fears of catching a virus from a student that has been in my class forever. So I continued to dig. And I usually don't go onto Twitter and social media, but since what I saw on the news was not matching the reality I was facing, I started to see other stories of healthcare workers at the New Life Center not being tested. These stories were everywhere, not just mine. And so I stayed on hold for 2 hours for the coronavirus hotline in Washington, because we were told that tests were here and were coming and all this stuff, So I waited for 2 hours and talked to an individual there. And this is all just Saturday. And Friday was the first community case at a school in the country, still is. And then Saturday, this is all happening. And the health department official in Washington was very kind. She kept leaving the phone to actually go ask questions about my particular case, because at this point, I really wanted to find out if what I was hearing was true or people exaggerating or what was going on, because my story wasn't nearly as bad as the stories of healthcare workers, of old people not being allowed to be tested, et cetera. So she came right out and told me on Saturday, one day after the outbreak, that we really don't care who has it and who doesn't. Because one, it doesn't matter, it's incurable. So it doesn't matter if you have it or not. And two, it doesn't matter because most people are going to be fine. So here in Washington, we don't really care who has it and who doesn't have it. And that really, again, if you watch how Wuhan has started to see a decrease in number, it was not by not caring who has it and who doesn't. Other countries, if you watch the list of what's happening, their cases, some countries are actually controlling their cases and they're not skyrocketing, and they're testing 15,000 people a day. And our numbers are skyrocketing, even though we've only tested about 2,000 patients in the whole outbreak. So, it just was not at all in any way what I expected from this country's response. So that was just day one. So I don't know how many other details you want after that, but there was a lot more after that.
Well, so something that's really interesting to me is the fact that only 4 students who were in contact with the one who was supposedly in the one who was in question got tested. When, let's say, the kid, I don't know, did the kid end up actually having the coronavirus? Or
yes.
did
no, it was the news I got on Friday was a confirmed positive case of the coronavirus. And the only reason he was tested, and this is not confidential because now I've read it on news, et cetera, is, he had the flu, went to a clinic, sent home, continued to have the flu, saw a second clinic. Parents or he were not notified he was tested. But there was a researcher at the University of Washington doing a study on the regular flu. And when you are doing research, you sometimes have access to doctors' samples. That's the only way they do research studies. So through this research study, he was confirmed to have the COVID-19. Had it not been for that research, he would have just come back to school. He came back to school on Friday because he was feeling better. And so the only 4 students they notified were 4 students they feel he was in close contact with on Friday before they sent him home. So yes, it is a confirmed case. So we keep seeing in the news, if and when there is a confirmed case in a school, they'll rethink decisions. My school has a confirmed case, but we are not actually rethinking decisions much. So yeah, that was the story on that student. And yes, it was a confirmed case.
I think I can understand to a certain extent the idea of just like not wanting to have people worry, and especially like a school district in particular saying like, oh yeah, well this person just got tested, or he's the only one that came back positive. But then if you have one person who's positive in like an environment like a school district, because things you're seeing, especially today, a lot of conventions like Seattle Comic-Con, a lot of things that are happening in Seattle get canceled, pushed back, just things all around the U.S. That would normally happen around this time of year, just getting pushed back or canceled altogether because of the concerns of the coronavirus. So if they're all doing that for these type of big conventions where there's a bunch of people in like in one area, that's kind of what a school is in a way. So yeah, and it seems like there's just less of a worry or focus on it. Now, there is a thing that's saying that like kids can't get it, but still, like, I feel like, and you did bring this up in one of your Facebook posts. If like a high schooler goes to school, ends up getting it, typically they're going to be okay, because they would be able to fight it off. But it's just going home to where they have their parents or their grandparents live with them, the worry of bringing that home with them and putting them in danger. So now a kid who is in high school from the age of like 15 to 17 really is having to be dealt with the situation of, do I go to school to pass my classes and worry about bringing something back home and putting my family at risk, or do I stay home, fail my classes just to keep my family, healthy and safe?
Yeah, there's not really research on there's no research that says kids can't get it. There is some evidence that suggests they might get it less, or like you said, just be affected less. But like on the Diamond Princess, where there were over 700 confirmed cases, there were just as many ratio-wise of 20-year-olds getting it as any other age group. So we don't have much evidence, but in that close setting, because a cruise ship actually has more square feet than a high school. And so in those situations, young people are getting it. But it's not that it's because we feel the young people are safe. There are very good reasons for keeping schools open as far as us being the babysitters for society. It is not about them losing an education. It is about whether or not, if schools close, then all the people who rely on schools to watch their kids, then their lives become impacted by this. And while that is a very legitimate concern, it is forgetting that school systems in Washington alone, we have 55,000 adult teachers, and probably that number or more of support personnel that are adults in the school. And so is teaching, my current was skipping to now, and there's a lot in between, but skipping to now, I did have a negative coronavirus test yesterday. And so that's very good. So now I have to make decisions moving forward with no data, since we aren't testing people. And the thing is, I understand the importance of school, but is it worth risking my life to go to school and provide this social service? And is it possible that we need to rethink education right now? And so if that service is needed to watch children, not to educate children, then are there other means where the people in charge could be protected than simply sending them to really crowded classrooms? My classroom is smaller than my living room, and I have 28 people in there cycling through all day for a total of about 140. So is that really the best place to put students and adults together? The cafeteria, you remember what cafeterias are like.
Yeah.
Those cafeteria workers, suddenly hit me yesterday, one of my posts, because I got tested in the parking garage of UW. And
yeah. I want you to go into that.
Yeah, but I was contrasting that with the idea of what a health nurse's office is like at the school right now. And it is not what I've been experienced as a patient with a cough and some of the symptoms. How the health service is treating it is 100 magnitude difference of how a school nurse is equipped. And so we are not concerned about that. It's never brought up. People have asked at news conferences, what about the teachers and students? And the response always focuses on the students and the disruption to society it would cause if we were to close schools. But I think people need to start looking at some alternative options, because I don't know that it is fair to expect the adults. I haven't been able to find the exact percent, but a very large number of our teachers are in their 60s because we have an older population of teachers in Washington ready to retire. So those are the people they're saying, don't go to a public place, and yet we are expected to come to school with the thousands and teach or babysit, whatever. And I don't think teaching is babysitting, but at this time in our society, that is the role. No one's talking about how important education is. They're talking about how we got to have this social service, because we are what let other people continue to have a livelihood. But I just don't know if teachers should be expected to take that risk.
Yeah. Kind of bouncing back. I saw the picture of where you got tested, and I'll throw that up too. But can you kind of go into that? Because I think that is just absolutely absurd and really weird and out there. Like, I would never expect to say I got tested for a global disease in a parking garage.
Well, first of all, I'm incredibly thankful for UW that they were willing to do that. So I in no way hold them like they shouldn't have done this, because the reasons are sound why they did. If I had walked into that office, first it was my rheumatology office where lots of people are immunocompromised. So the most at-risk population. So if I would have walked in there positive and got tested, many things could have happened. For example, passing it. What if I used the restroom? What if I, whatever, and I pass it to patients too. Just getting tested, she said they would have had to spend 2 to 3 hours sanitizing the room once I left. And that they have so many sick patients right now, they don't have the staff to spend 3 hours on a room to test me. So I don't hold UW in any way like this was bad of them. The reason for my post and the reason for going public with it is because it absolutely ingrained in me that this is not just the flu. This is not just the norm, because I have been attacked on Facebook by some people that call it a hoax, that this would never happen in our country, and that I didn't post proof because I didn't show the nurse swabbing me, but I decided to respect her privacy. And
that would just be weird to get, poked,
yeah.
And then you're just recording it or like taking a picture of that.
They don't poke you, they stick it up your nose. So yeah,
Oh.
I was not going to do that. But people, several people on Facebook started this whole chain of this is a lie and a hoax because this would never happen here. And the reason I posted is it is happening here because with 80 cases in Washington, although they aren't really counting anymore, with 80 cases in Washington, our health system is already totally overwhelmed. So because I'm autoimmune, because they had ruled out pneumonia early in the week, my rheumatologist did decide to give me a chest x-ray because I was still coughing. And, I do often diseases like the cold can progress into something more dangerous because of my medications. So he told me to go to my primary, who they absolutely refuse to see you. The clinic absolutely refuses to see you if you have any symptom that could possibly be COVID-19. You have to stay home. But he decided to go ahead and give me a chest x-ray. So they ruled out pneumonia, which is kind of like the first step in getting tested, even with supposed looser guidelines. So then when I wrote him on, was it just yesterday? No, it was 2 days ago. So when I wrote him on Thursday and said, I know I don't have pneumonia, I'm still sick, and I, have to make decisions about, do I go back to work and teach students and all this. So they called me and said, my doctor did want me to go ahead and be tested. And they gave me directions that if I came into the clinic, first of all, the washing the hands, the finding a mask, there's none there. You got to go to the desk to ask for one, and all this. And if there was a line, to just walk straight through the doors. Don't wait in the line. So I was a little nervous about that, like someone grabbing me and saying, hey.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, I understand all this. So I'm just about to UW, and I get a call, not from my nurse, from some person that seemed very, very flustered saying, wait, stop, don't come in. And I was like, okay, I'm pretty much here. And he says, well, no, okay, well, your doctor, he wants you tested, but the infection control says, no, you can't be tested. And so and I'm like, so he really was like not sure what to tell this person who was just told they're going to be tested and now told they're not going to be tested. And I said, okay, I'm here. Do I turn around and drive back home? And he said, well, how close are you? I'm like 2 minutes out. He's like, okay, just park and we'll try to figure this out. And I said, okay. So I park and do another little post on Facebook. Oh, never mind. I'm not being tested, or maybe I'm being tested. I don't know. So again, the only reason I guess I qualified is because I'm at risk. I have a UW doctor. I'd had a chest x. Sorry, you can't catch it through the screen. No, I had a chest x-ray, so they're ruling out other things, et cetera. And then he called back and he said, would you be willing to just meet us in the parking garage and we can do the test from your car? And I said, yes. I'm sure I could have said no, And I don't know if they would have just said, well, I'm sorry, then we can't get you in today, because of that 2 to 3 hour cleaning time required. But I said yes, because to me, this seems a very logical way to do it that avoids all the possible exposure. Like, I have been very worried about the possibility of what if I have it and I could pass it to someone else? How careful do I need to be? So it was fine with me. But as I sat there, so I parked my car and I took a little picture. I thought about being one of those people. I put my cell phone in the cup holder and had it shined where they'd be able to see out the window. And then I thought, no, this is just bad. I don't want the nurse being on the video, etc. So, I took a little picture of the place and said, hey, I'm being tested. This is the doctor's office. And so, she was incredibly nice. She didn't come out completely garbed up. She came out carrying her stuff, in her nurse outfit, and then said, I didn't want to walk through the clinic and the parking garage all suited up and still panic. So then she started suiting up, just with all the protective gear and the mask and, all that, and explaining it's all just because what if I cough during the test, because it kind of gags you, so like all that. Yeah. So she suits all up. I did question whether it was sanitary to do it in a parking garage because I am immunocompromised, but she assured me, the test is all sealed, etc. So I was completely fine that they did it there. So she just had me like sit in my car seat and, did open the door and we ran the test and she was very nice. Everything goes in this biohazard bag and, that was it. And so the reason I posted is not anything about UW doing something wrong. It's just, again, trying to get out the message that this is not, quote, normal. This is not the normal flu. I have been an autoimmune patient for 9 years now, and I have never been treated like I'm being treated now, and never have I had a harder time getting medical care for something. And that poses a lot of questions for me as people get sick and cannot access a doctor. How many deaths will we have that are, quote, not coronavirus, but are due to the lack of medical care? So, what I'm trying to do is raise awareness by posting that picture. So I guess people investigated me and called UW and said, are you doing tests in your parking garage? And of course, UW said no. And, and then they're calling me liars and fearmongers and all this. And the thing is, it's pretty much been my personal story. I'm not a news reporter that's going around trying to collaborate, or whatever the word is, all facts. I'm just telling what's happening to me as someone who's a teacher, been in a community with an active outbreak, a close-knit community, a public classroom, and autoimmune, at-risk person, and exhibiting symptoms. Like, it absolutely did not match what I thought this country's response was going to be. And I still, despite my very good news that I was negative, have to go forward trying to make decisions as an at-risk person. And the complacency that I'm trying to still bring awareness to, that now the school's message is, well, if there's, one case and there's this many cases in Washington, we all know it's everywhere. So there's no sense cleaning the schools. There's no sense stopping the schools. We're just going to, what can you do? And to the fact that our government has given up in 6 days on containing this thing is really, really horrible, because those death rates and those measures are going to be different in a country that doesn't try to do anything. They're going to be higher. And so I'm not ready to give up. Yes, testing should have been rolled out as of the first case in early January, and it was not widespread testing, but I don't think it's absolutely too late, and it will still help people like me and healthy people make informed decisions about their actions. Because if you've got a cold and you don't have sick leave, you're going to go to work right now because you don't know, and it's probably a cold. But if you actually knew you had the virus, you might consider those that you could pass it to a little more carefully. I was thinking of a movie plot the other day where we're all drivers, and we have we don't know what car we have, but certain cars will kill 3.4% of the people that they pass, just passengers, et cetera. And you're like, well, but so every 3 people out of 100 are going to die as I drive past, and people are like, yeah, but you don't know them. Don't worry about it. Oh, and if you pass someone old, their chance is more like 50% they'll die. And, and it's like, oh, okay. But I have to go to work, so I'm going to get in my car and drive and kill 3.5% or more of the population I pass. But if they knew that my car was the car that's going to kill all these people, they would take different action, And so I just still feel testing and education and people not giving up and not saying it's inevitable is absolutely paramount, because if we do nothing in this country, we are going to be worse off than Wuhan, because they took measure. They didn't at first, and neither are we, but they took measure. And if we don't do anything, it is really scary to me what's going to happen. Our health system is overwhelmed with 80 cases here in Washington, and those cases are going to go up.
Okay, so one of the big things that I want to dial in on is the fact that we have, like you said, like 80 confirmed cases. And something that I've kind of done a little bit of research as well, something that I've been seeing a lot of is a lot of people kind of in your position who feel like they might have it, not getting tested and just being told to get sent back home as they get sicker and sicker and sicker. And they can't do anything about it. They're not giving them any type of medication or anything like that. They're just sending them home. And let's say the person does have it. Now they don't know if they do or don't. And now they're going to try to go to work. They're going to try to do these other things, because at the end of the day, if you're just having cold-like symptoms, if you have a cold, you're not going to not go to work. You're not going to not go to school and all these other type of things. You're going to want to try to. And especially with just not even knowing or having it confirmed, you're putting everyone else at risk. And another thing that I saw, then I think you shared it as well, was I think it was the elderly home, where it kind of broke out there, and the residents, the workers there, were wearing masks and to kind of protect themselves, and just quarantined all the patients there. And someone brought up a really good point about because they released a statement saying that there was no worry about it, in a way, to kind of calm everyone. But they talked about, like, if there's no worry, why are they wearing masks? And you're just going to frighten the people there. And secondly, masks are known to not really help or prevent it. So, if there really is a case there, then why are you doing it in general,
Yeah, so sadly, with this disease, that if you haven't gotten the most latest news in the last hour, your stuff is out of date. So today I've not found out what's happening with Life Center yet, and I haven't found out what's happening with the cruise ship yet off the coast that Trump wants to keep there so that our numbers don't go up. And I have not watched recently, so I really don't know the latest. But that whole scenario of what happened there is an example of another huge fear of mine, that this disease is going to hurt the invisible people, the quote unimportant people, the poor people, far more than people of importance. And so here's this Life Center that now has, I believe, 8 deaths, but again, numbers change. But I think it's 8 deaths in the same facility, yet people were not tested. And what we heard, even when the task force was put out, is, well, they will be tested soon. But I've not heard if they've actually all been tested yet. And relatives want to take out their members that are negative. Obviously, you want to leave if you're negative. But then it kind of came out that they can't do anything because there's no place to put those people if they were to leave, because they're people who need medical care. So here's an example of people being picked off one by one by one as the death toll mounts. And it could be much higher. I'm not sure at this point how many are from Life Center. They're picked off one by one because we cannot take the healthy ones out of there to a safer place, because those healthy ones still need medical care, and there's no place to put them. And as far as masks goes, I understand telling the public they do not work. because one, there's a shortage for healthcare workers. But the reality is for people in close contact with sick people, the N95 mask has been proven to be effective in some very big studies in China. And obviously people in close contact could get those droplets on them. So those people like healthcare workers, don't need masks. But then as you walk around the street, what is your chance that someone gets their sneeze droplets on you, right? So a mask is not very effective and it has to be worn correctly. As a teacher, however, what is my chance of getting a droplet on me? I have to say it happens every day, I'm sure. And now they're saying it can be on money. How many papers are turned into me a day, typically? And so if we're going to continue schools and tell people masks aren't effective, can we rethink that? Maybe teachers should wear masks because we are exposed in close contact to droplets all day long. And so it's not that masks are not effective. So I'm also a little tired of that message, because if they were not effective, then the person doing my test would not have had on a full face shield, mask, etc. They are effective for when you have to be in close contact with people who have the disease and if they are worn correctly. But they are in short supply, so they do not want people, hanging on to them. As an immune compromised person, I tried to order an N95 mask online, and 10 of them were going to cost me $274, and I would get it in April. I found a different one that is an N95, and it wasn't $274, but I still can't get it till the end of April, because if I'm going to be in close contact, very close contact with 140 people a day, then I do feel like I would want to wear a mask, not only if I'm coughing and sneezing, but just for protection. And I would have to do research on how to wear it and how to fit it and all that. But I don't think people really understand how crowded a lot of schools are. And there is no way to do social distancing. I probably have the smallest class in my school for a regular ed teacher. So some teachers actually do spread out their kids a little bit. My kids have to be elbow to elbow to elbow, and I have to be right there with them. And so since schools are going to remain open no matter what is pretty much the message I'm getting, then I'm thinking, we need to then admit the risk we're taking and the conditions we teach in, and maybe we need protection just like healthcare workers. But since there's a shortage, I think the healthcare workers probably need them first or do need them first. But I think this whole message being put out there, they do not work, is not quite the truth, or else why would our healthcare workers need them? They do not work if you're just walking down the street and you aren't elbow to elbow with sick people.
Mm-hmm. Also, you mentioned a really good point in one of your posts, is that this is really attacking the elderly people, a lot of lower class people, a lot of just like less fortunate in a way. And if it was like on the flip side, if it was attacking rich people, people of high, like in the high corporate area and all that, there would be more higher measures taking place by now, or even just from the beginning compared to how it is just now, just by it taking out elderly people and whatnot.
Yeah, I just really felt for the people at that life center watching the test being helicoptered into the cruise ship to test people with symptoms when they had been waiting a week and had, I'm pretty sure it's up to 10, but had 8+ deaths at their facility, and they still couldn't get tested. But then as soon as a cruise ship has some possible cases, everyone with symptoms is tested. How is that okay? And the only reason that Life Center is starting to get more attention is because people willing to go on social media and share their stories, because it's not being covered on the news until then. So I do think that, I would like to stick to only CNN and a few places for my news, but in this time, we can't. News is being censored, and information is being censored. The CDC used to post how many tests they did, where they did them, results. They have not updated their website for about 4 days, and they keep taking numbers on and off. So it's up to news to go around and find out who has it.
So that segue pretty good into the next type of topic. So I'm in no way condoning or looking at it in a positive light, but the false news coverage of this whole situation, I understand that they want to kind of not let everybody freak out about it, but with that, I understand why but I bounce back and forth. Do I think it's right that, they're kind of like trying to maintain like the public to not freak out and everything? Yeah. But at the same time, I think that based on everything you said and based on what everybody else is saying, this is a very serious situation and it needs to be taken serious rather than just, kind of underestimating it and just kind of like really not testing people, not releasing because it does seem a little ridiculous in the sense of if I'm correct, the virus can stay dormant for 2 weeks. So that's especially in schools or work areas, that's a very long time just to be there and anybody can get it. And it's kind of ridiculous and just absurd that you would say, oh yeah, there's only 80 confirmed cases in, Washington state when this thing can stay, contagious for 2 weeks. And, we're not really, we now today are slowly seeing school shut down for a day, campuses closing and just sticking to online and whatnot. But it does seem odd that it would make it seem like every single day the number should be going up more and more and more and more, and just keep on multiplying. So I kind of want to get your interpretation of why you think there's that fake news coverage of it, and do you kind of your opinion on if you can kind of see if it's right. Obviously it's not right, but if you can kind of see why in a way and what your interpretation is of that.
Well, I wouldn't all the way call it fake news. I would call it news that is based on lack of information. So, it's not that there are, well, okay. I hope that it is not that there are more than 80 confirmed cases in Washington. I hope they are telling the truth there. The problem is we don't have tests. So they are not really going into, unless you watch deeper news, to watch the scientists speak and things like that, they are saying it's been moving around for 6 weeks here. There are thousands of people in my area with the virus, thousands. That's what scientists say. But we don't have those confirmed cases. But what is very disturbing is that the news channels are the only people even trying to find out the truth, that we have an organization and a government that should be taking charge. The CDC should be able to talk to the public, keep very accurate and up-to-date information on the number of tests, where they're positive, where, how many have been done, et cetera. And that number is no longer available even to scientists. So they have to call individual states and do tons of research to even try to get a number. You will notice that the number varies from 340 cases in the US now, or probably more than that now, haven't watched the news much today, to as little as 215 cases in the US. So why a difference of over 100? Well, it's because we no longer have a government that is willing to tell us exactly what's going on. And so that is very scary to me. And again, we thought that was only other countries, that the dictators tried to just tell their people it's okay, and the people didn't get the truth. We are used to being told the truth here. And I mean, I won't get into that, but that's the assumption, that we are used to being told some truth here. And I think, President Trump going on the news yesterday and repeatedly saying every person that wants to can be tested right now and yesterday. And, this is what has gotten me involved, is it's so hard as a person to know personally.
Yeah.
My experience, this is not true, sir. And, then, of course, Pence did say something different, but we've got vice president and president giving us two totally different messages. What kind of country is that? So I think, as a mother of 3 kids, all of my kids would be dead. by the age of 5, if fear were not part of their lives. We stay alive by our brain determining what we need to be afraid of and not. And so I think we deserve information to decide how afraid we should be. That fear is not our enemy. It is what keeps all humankind alive. And hysteria, racism, attacking people, no, that's not the same as fear. Fear is like, this is serious. I need to not only think of myself, but think of my neighbor and think of people that you can't identify me as an at-risk person. And we might be able to identify the old, but they're saying 60 and over. 60 is pretty young once you get up to be my age. I'm 54.
I don't understand.
So, so I think that we need information that is up to date, real, and constant. And that information might make some people afraid. But if I had that information, I could make an informed decision about whether to go to work on Monday now that I'm negative. But I don't have any reliable information to make that decision on. And if the numbers truly came out that we had, like Ireland did start, not Ireland, I'm sorry, so many things, Italy did start testing, and their death rate is higher than ours right now, and their cases are like 5,000, something like that, because it changes very rapidly. But they did start some more mass testing, way more mass testing, and their numbers climbed, and they're taking action like closing schools, et cetera. I mean, what if we had mass testing and we have 10,000 cases in the U.S.? Would it start to change policy before it's too late? Would it instill fear in people if they found out that, yes, we do have 10,000 plus cases, because we probably do in the whole U.S., because every one confirmed case is a whole lot of other unconfirmed cases, is what every scientist says. And so would it produce fear? Yes. Is fear an okay response in order to save lives? Yes. That lives are more important than simply denying the truth and making some people feel good because they probably won't be killed by this. President's advice was, you probably won't die. And that's still a true statement. Most people probably won't die. But I think that the people who are going to die of this disease are very, very, very important. And so I think information is paramount, and it is just so frustrating as someone who's not an expert in any way, that has a personal story of all the people and doctors I've talked to in 1 week's time, that how what I see on the news absolutely in no way reflects reality of what is actually happening from my personal experience, not from investigative reporting, but from many doctors' calls and many visits on the phone, etc. I couldn't even go into my doctor's office to pick up the note they wrote me for work. And I, could have walked in without saying anything. But after sitting in that parking garage, that's when it did freak me out a little bit, just how serious this situation is. Again, not blaming you, Doug, just this waiting in that dark place for someone to come test me. This isn't normal and what I expected. So that made me just even more afraid before I got test results. So I needed this note from my doctor, my primary care, for me to stay out of work for at least a week because of my immunocompromised state. And they had the letter waiting for me on the second floor. But, I sat in my car and thought, well, I could use my jacket to touch the elevator button, because after that garage experience, I was more determined to not do anything. So I called him and said, this is my situation. Could you just bring the letter outside to me? And they were like, no, we are not comfortable doing that. And I was like, okay, I'll come up and get it. And they were like, no, wait, let's renegotiate. Hold on. So they go back and forth and literally call it negotiating with me to go pick up a letter, not be seen, just walk in there, get my letter, walk out. And they ended up, I need one with a signature, but they mailed it to me, and my district is going to allow me to turn it in later. And, just all these details. And this is how doctor's offices are treating it. Yet on the news, it's like, hey, don't worry, you probably won't get it. And I'm being told, like, don't come in this building. And I have like a little eye infection going on, which is true, and other things. But man, you're not going to be able to see a doctor. And it's just terrifying to me, the number of deaths from, quote, flu or respiratory distress that won't be diagnosed are occurring right this moment from COVID-19. And the number of patients, people have been writing to me with their stories. Their kids with asthma can't go to the doctor, can't be seen. You can't go in. If you've got a COVID-19 symptom, you can't go in. So their kids with asthma can't be seen. Their kids with ear infections can't be seen. Anything that might relate to this disease, you cannot see a doctor at most clinics. Now, I have heard, like in Olympia, you can still go to the doctor. So it could be that, I am in the epicenter here with Snohomish County and King County, both. So maybe if I need medical care, I just need to drive to Idaho and I could get it, or drive south Washington and I could get it. But right now in this area, the reality is not matching the sense of calm they're trying to give us. And trying to get that envelope from my doctor is what made me start to think about a nurse's office in a high school. And high schoolers, these studies that kids don't get it. Do we count 18-year-olds as kids? Are 17-year-olds kids? Like, are the studies addressing young adults? Are we talking about first and second graders? I don't know, but I just shudder to think of how it's being handled at a school. And do I want to be in that environment?
Yeah. I also want to bring up, you mentioned this one in the post that you said the doctors wouldn't see you because of your symptoms, and this in the state you're in, you probably don't have it, and if you did, you'd be fine. Which kind of boggled me a bit, because they said if you did have it, you'll probably be fine. But I mean, what else are they gonna say? If you did have it, you won't be fine. Like, it just, it just seems like a weird thing. Just like, like, oh, you're really sick, but if you do have it, you'll be fine. Just go back home. It's
Right.
just kind of a weird.
You made me think of the opposite. If they would have said, oh, you're immunocompromised and you have symptoms. Well, if you do have it, you have a good chance of dying, but just go back home. So they're not going to say that, but that is what the CDC is saying now. And if you look at all the graphs of, this everyone posting, we're all going to be fine. I want to post the graph showing what age groups, what are their actual risk factors. And if you are 70, our presidents, the current and future, will be in their 70s. If you're in your 70s, your chance of dying is not 3.4%. And I can't cite the percentage right now, but it's way more than that. And so, yes, you're going to be fine. If we should clarify that if you are a young, healthy American and have the means to stay out of work and the savings to stay home and all these qualifications, you're going to be fine. The rest of you, maybe not. But they can't say that, but that's going to be the reality. So as I contemplate it all, I begin to really worry about our social structures and people that aren't young, healthy, and rich, and how this disease is going to affect them.
So it was really kind of hard researching with this, because there's so much information from when it started to now. And not only that, but I was just all like, man, what if, like, after an hour after the interview, another breaking news thing happens, it's just like this thing, there's just new stuff that keeps on coming out about it. And I guess something that I want to ask you is just kind of like, do you think it's kind of where we are today? Do you think we're in a better place than we were like a week ago from now? Like, kind of just kind of the exposure of it, and like different companies and like I said, Comic-Con, all these other type of like events getting canceled or pushed back. Like, do you think with all these things happening that it's getting better now?
Well, two answers to that. I think that when I first started, that Saturday was, one community case in my community. Now that's very, very old news, and that's 1 week ago. So, and at that time, what we were hearing and this lack of testing had not been made known. So I That's why King 5 interviewed me, because that was, quote, a story, because we didn't realize it was going to be handled this way,
Mhm.
So yes, I think it's getting better that more people are getting the truth about the lack of testing, and that the lack of testing could lead to both hurting at-risk individuals and could be greatly underestimating the numbers. So that's gotten better. Now, have we gotten better in our containment and response to this virus? No. I think that our lack of response means that this thing is spreading like it did in Wuhan here in Seattle, that they at first did not respond, and they at first did not tell their public what was going on. And that is exactly what we're doing. So I think the situation has become much, much worse. But I do think bits of truth are coming out more and more, because it just can't be denied, And so I watched a 2-hour CNN, talk on the coronavirus. Such fun TV watching lately. And they were asking the experts, so this place in Washington, this Life Center, why haven't those people been tested? And they're sick, and the healthcare workers are sick, and they're not being tested. And all the experts were like, yeah, we don't know, and that was the end. And then they took another question. And so Life Center did finally get some news. However, as of yesterday, the word was still that we are going to test them, all of them, in the future, but they hadn't all been tested. So I don't know the latest. Like I said, I'm so out of date because I didn't do tons of reading this morning. So I have no idea what has happened since I went to bed last night. And I have no idea which sources. I used to go to my health department's page. And what's disturbing is they do claim they update it twice a day, but it is the exact same numbers for like 2 days. And I know that that is not true. So, and they don't tell us how many were tested anymore. And they came out and said they weren't going to provide any information on the people that were positive and their whereabouts or like their situations. So what that means is if a student in my school is positive and they didn't want to tell anybody, the parents didn't report it, that the CDC, the government agencies, et cetera, are no longer letting people know where these cases are happening. And that's incredibly dangerous too, obviously. So this lack of information is horrible. I did watch a scientist in the UK last night talking about the spread in the UK, but then she asked some questions about the US. And, we are behind almost every nation in the way we are handling this disease. We may not be behind Wuhan at the beginning. I don't know. Many say we're treating it just the same as they did in the beginning as far as Washington, because other areas don't have as big a cluster. Although I think New York's going to pass us because their governor is actively trying to test people and put 4,000 people on quarantine. That's not happening here. So my school had an active case and 4 kids were watched. And that's it. And their siblings continued to go to school. So we're not doing it the way New York is even doing it. So New York is going to surpass us, but that's going to give us the sense of relief, and we might go out of the news. But it doesn't mean we are in any way under control of this virus. It means that we have not continued to push for what we need to really identify the problem. Through my life, I've learned one thing: you can't solve a problem until you actually define it and identify it, and then you can solve it. And we have not defined it. We have not identified the scope of this problem. And so there's absolutely no way we are taking appropriate measures because we don't even know what those would be.
So another thing that I want to bring up is I think also what kind of goes along, at least for me, is that I think, especially in today's day and age, there's just so much like big breaking news. Like you always hear about another shooting this on these days. And then so with being so oversaturated with all this type of like negative news and all this other stuff. And then like we kind of saw something similar to this with the Ebola virus a few years back. I don't remember it being this like out there and bad. I remember people made a huge deal about it when the first cases came to the US and whatnot. But at least for me, when I first heard about it, and I can't speak on anyone else's part, but I think a lot of people share my kind of opinion based upon like you see social media posts that people are just overreacting and stuff like that. For me, it was just like kind of another thing, like once you get fed all this like stuff and you see it every day, it's just when you hear something about like this, it's just like another thing that is happening. So I guess for me, I think it was a little hard to really grasp the severity of the situation because of just seeing all these other bad things. Do you think that kind of contributes into like how it's being overall portrayed, that like, just the whole world in general has been so prone to hearing all the news pretty much all over the world of all these other bad things that are happening for like 20 years now since we've had the internet? Do you think that's kind of contributed to the reaction to or lack thereof of this whole thing?
Yeah, I do. I think that especially without information, that it's so hard in this day and age. How do we know what to really be concerned about? How do we pick and choose what affects us and what doesn't? And how do we even begin to care about people that aren't us if we fall into that healthy young category that doesn't have to worry? And so I think it becomes extremely difficult to sort of care unless we're given facts, and facts could change that. But if public officials, I don't know if I'm allowed to say Trump, but if Trump says, we have this under control, there are 15 cases now, there will be 0 cases by the end of the week, and they're all going to be okay. And then and that's what he said 1 week ago. And there were only 15 cases then. So now we're over 300 cases, and 17 have died as of this morning. And still, he is telling us it is largely contained. And so when our public officials are giving one message and our scientists are giving another, it's going to continue to be very, very confusing for people to actually listen. But if scientists and if public officials who really know nothing about this type of outbreak listened and let scientists actually speak on the outbreak, then I think people would start to listen because they would hear a unified message and understand the severity. I was absolutely appalled, and I don't know if this has changed, but not, again, less than a week ago, right? Since it all started a week ago. There was a no doctor, medical professional, et cetera, could make statements on the coronavirus without it first being approved by the vice president. I don't think the vice president is the one that should be deciding what information to give our public. I heard someone say last night that there are political and economic factors that are very real, and that there are political plans and strategies to deal with those things. But this is not something that can be dealt with a political strategy. This is something that needs to be dealt with science and with facts. And if we had a unified message, I think people could and would start to understand it's not the flu. But since you're hearing from the president that he has a hunch that it doesn't kill 3.4%, he has a hunch that it's way less, that it's less than 1%, then people hear that. And, there are a lot of people that look to him for leadership. So people hear that and think, oh, they're exaggerating again. And he has no scientific basis. He says he has a hunch. And that's what people are hearing. And so I don't think that people are going to take it seriously unless somehow we can be united in our quest to find out what the problem is, and that scientists can start to be the spokesman for this disease and not politics.
All right, so that kind of concludes all my notes and questions. Is there anything that you kind of want to add, or like any like kind of last words or thoughts you want to add to it?
Well, I guess, as I kind of contemplate what next and what now, that our government is definitely dropping the ball. And so whether people believe that or not, in the time being, the absolute only protection for the most vulnerable in our population is for each individual's choice to be responsible. And I don't think people realize that you're not going to get tested. We're not going to hear the real numbers. We're not going to really know the extent of the spread in our communities. Now they're saying that big batch of tests in the next few weeks will be coming, not by the end of the week. So in the next few weeks, we might start to hear more. A month down the road, we might hear more. But in the meantime, personal responsibility and a true understanding of the fact that if you are young and healthy but sick, you could kill someone is not an over dramatization, is not a fear mongering statement. It's a reality. So it comes down to individuals. And I know that puts people at risk. My experience of trying to self-quarantine for a week has been quite comical, and that could be a whole nother story I write someday of the problems I've run into in trying to do that. And so, right now it's up to individuals to care about more than just themselves.
Hello, and thank you all for watching that. I just kind of want to throw this quick last-minute video at the end of this to just kind of say that we recorded this on March 7th at 10:30 in the morning. I just want to say that because after we got done recording, her and I talked for about like 30 more minutes, and while we were talking, new news came out about some of the subjects that we were talking about. So I just want to throw that out there. And let us all know what you guys thought about this podcast and some of the points that we brought up, along with what your whole opinion is about this whole coronavirus thing. And yeah, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.